So welcome back. As you know, I'm Eli, the computer guy, and we are here in the wilds of Vancouver. And I have Thom with me from D-Wave, and we're going to be talking about quantum computers for a couple of minutes.
Yeah. It's exciting.
It's
good
exciting
to be here with you, Eli.
Good. Okay, so I saw you guys, so they actually, FTC compliance, they paid for me to come out back in 2020, right before the entire world shut down. And I got to see your quantum computers back then, which were pretty cool.
Thanks, yeah.
So one of the big questions, I've had this question for a while, but we're actually here at Web Summit, so it's a little bit more on point, is explain to us exactly like what is a quantum computer, at least for D-Wave?
Yep.
And then the other thing that I'm curious about is what is the value for a startup company? So your CEO before talked about it, which was amazing, but the scale was so massive. It was like, oh, I understand the problem, but yeah, I don't have $1 billion to solve that problem.
Okay.
So like with the startup companies, why would they be looking at something like D-Wave?
Yeah, so I think probably the easiest way to think about quantum computing is as energy efficient computing for hard problems.
Yeah.
The notion behind building a quantum computer is to make use of quantum effects to perform calculations that are too slow or too hard to do with classical computers.
Yeah.
And that suggests that computers can use quantum effects like a resource.
Okay.
At D-Wave, we're building two different types of quantum computers, and they make use of quantum effects in different ways as a resource.
Yeah.
In the quantum annealing computers that we're building, it uses the quantum effects to help it move between solutions more quickly. So if we're creating a plan or optimizing the allocation of resources, we might have an idea of what we want to do, and we want to move to a better allocation of those resources. We want that transition to happen fast.
Yeah.
In the other model, in a gate model of quantum computers, we want to use quantum effects to allow the computer to store more information.
Okay.
And that's really useful if we want to do like molecular simulation for like drug discovery or something like that. So the net of it is that computers are now able to use quantum effects to help them perform important calculations for us. From a startup perspective, what's happening is we've got this like radically new performant capability. We're able to solve problems, and really the technology is scaling so fast that the economy needs to catch up. So startups actually have a great opportunity to understand the technology and then apply it to different industries and show those customers how they can onboard quantum computing quickly. A lot of people, I would say the misconception with quantum computing is the performance power is going to be so great, that's all you need to worry about. But I can tell you that the game of quantum computing is going to be won or lost based on ease of use.
Yeah.
And a lot of startups, they create that connection between the technology layer and the business applications so they can demonstrate return on investment for those businesses easily.
Yeah.
And I think that will give them an opportunity to open up new markets.
Okay. So when I was there before, so with quantum computing, there's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into quantum computing, and there was this whole discussion I had with your CEO on whether or not you actually were, like you had to prove to the world that you actually were quantum computing.
Right.
That's a whole story we don't have time for. So with the annealing process, so this is one of the processes, so it's basically its lowest energy use to come to a solution, essentially.
Right.
So like with that, and again, so if I'm actually a technology professional, like if I explain to you a NoSQL database versus a relational database, I know what to do with it. When I say lowest energy consumption in order to come to a solution, great, wonderful.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
Like, what can I use that for?
How to make that tangible? So, let's say we're scheduling employees who are going to be working in a grocery store.
Yeah.
We've got Amy, we've got Bruce. We're thinking, who's going to take the next shift in the deli department? Is it going to be Amy or is it going to be Bruce?
Yeah.
Well, if if we're only one person away from basically having that fully staffed, then there's a relationship between those two decisions, which is that I don't want it to be both Amy and Bruce, right? But I don't want it to be neither of them, right? I want to arrange those decisions so I'm choosing either Bruce or I'm choosing Amy. And that set of decisions affects a variety of other decisions we might make about the rest of the workforce and where they'll be working in the stores. We have to take into account, maybe Bruce is also trained to work in the floral department. Do we have enough people in the floral department? Can we arrange this choice of decisions so that Bruce is available?
Okay.
Or if this is an evening shift, we need to make sure someone's available to work the morning shift the next day.
Yeah.
So what you're doing is you're just capturing what you know about the problem, and then you're passing it to the quantum computer. And a good way of thinking about it is imagine those decisions are like bar magnets. They can be north up and north down, and that's Bruce is doing that shift or not. And you create this relationship with the bar magnets so they want to be in opposing states. And the quantum computer can sense that. It actually has those kinds of interactions.
Yeah.
And then it can use the quantum effects to to allow it to explore an enormous number of possible scenarios of decisions you'd be making quickly for you, so that it can pass you a good one quickly.
Okay. But when you talk about that, I mean, like, if you're just talking about a grocery store, seems like I can do an if-else statement on a database. So like at what, like we talked about the employee example. Is it really a grocery store, or is it an entire military?
So this is in the class of problems which are extremely difficult even at small scales.
Really?
So for instance, let's use like another application example, which would be like optimizing an energy grid.
Yeah.
Okay, so the version of that problem that's very easy for a classical computer is when you have a central power plant and then you just have transmission lines radiating out from it. In that scenario, what happens is that, like, let's say a home starts using more power. So that continuously increases the load on the network, and you just need to continually increase your production to match that load. And the decisions you make going down the east grid don't affect the decisions you have going down the west grid. That's what classical computers find really easy. If the problem you're working on is like that, you should be using classical computers all day long.
Yeah.
So continuous optimization, things where you're dividing resources like wine between two glasses or something like that. You can do it in any continuous division. Yeah. Where you run into problems is that if you move to like a modern decentralized energy grid, now you have multiple sources in the network. You've got power plants, you've got solar panels, you've got battery systems, and you've got like electric cars. Okay. Sometimes you're pushing energy to them and they're a sink, sometimes you're drawing energy from them and they're a source. Yeah. And you have to make decisions about what mode you're going to be using them in at different points of time. Yeah. And if those decisions were independent, that wouldn't be too bad. But because it affects how you use the rest of the pool of networks, the number of solutions, the number of possible scenarios you can consider is much, much more than the estimated number of particles in the universe. And that's what makes it hard for classical computers. So that's where we're able to bring quantum computers and classical computers together and tackle those hard industrial optimization problems. And they're deceptively difficult, even at small scales.
Okay. And then, so when I came to your office before, I thought one of the interesting things is everybody always asks, like, when am I going to have a quantum computer under my desk?
Right.
Or when is my smartphone going to be run by a quantum computer instead of an ARM processor?
Right.
And at least as you explained it before, it seemed much more like, it was more like a GPU than like a CPU replacement. As in, because you had at one point, you had a service where you'd actually go through Amazon, it would basically put all the information together and then send it to a quantum processing unit.
And we can do that now, actually, yeah. So we have a Leap Quantum Cloud service, which is available in 42 countries around the world every day of the year. It's got 99.9% availability. We've got SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, and our quantum computers have sub-second response time. So in fact, exactly that can happen. Although I don't have a mobile application set up to do it, you can actually pass queries from your mobile phone, and it'll go to the quantum computer and give you answers back with the latency time of communicating over that network. So really, it is the case that we can bring the power of quantum computing to people anywhere.
Okay. So that's the thing. So all the processing isn't happening on the quantum processing unit. That's only solving a particular set of problems, and the CPU or whatever other systems are dealing with other issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot like a computer where you have peripheral input-output systems with a quantum computer. Yeah. The other thing to think about is that, let's say you're trying to solve a production scheduling problem. You have here's the series of products I need to be building, and then I know exactly what tasks are involved in building each one of them. And then I have a relationship between those building tasks, like if this machine is used, it needs a 30-minute cooldown period before this next machine is used. So you can capture all that ahead of time, but then at the point that you have are given a list of products that have just been ordered, you have to put that together with what you know about how your manufacturing works, and then pass that to a system and say, okay, how do I allocate my resources so I get the most of my products built in the shortest period of time possible? So a lot of that pre-work you're doing is on the classical systems in your IT infrastructure, and you can run that yourself. Then it packages up this challenging problem and submits that to an API, at which point both classical computers and quantum computers can be an important resource for exploring the solution space of scenarios you need to consider and pass you back a good one. And that's what our technology products do for our users. We have hybrid solvers that are basically giving you the best of what classical and quantum computing can provide for those applications. And we have customers who are running applications in production and have been for years getting that value.
Okay. And so if somebody is interested in using a D-Wave product, and they're not a nation state, so I understand a nation state can buy whatever the hell they want, but a relatively normal, only McDonald's or something. like, do they buy a quantum computer, or is it going through a service? Is it more like AWS, or?
It's certainly they could purchase a quantum computer, but there's like much faster, simpler ways to get started.
Yeah.
So yeah, they would think about it as like a quantum computing as a service in the cloud.
Yeah.
And our Elite Quantum Cloud service would allow them to create a subscription where they would pass problems and get answers back.
Okay.
And they can develop new applications that way. They can run, production applications that way. So it's meant to make the interaction with the quantum computer as simple as possible, so that it's, people don't have to start with learning about quantum computing.
Yeah.
They can start with focusing on solving their problem.
Okay.
And then, we have our tool stack, our Ocean open source software development tool stack, which makes it easy for people to bring those technologies, like those applications, into their systems to scan them and see their dependencies. But then once they're running a production application, they can use that open source tool stack to sort of dive in and learn more about the technology when it's right for them.
And so when they're going to be designing things for D-Wave, what language? Is it like C# or Java, Node? I don't know.
Well, right now, like our software development kit is in Python.
It's in
so
Python,
really, you're
okay.
programming, with your laptop, writing programs that you can understand, capturing the relationships from the business problem you're trying to solve, and then representing that in a mathematical form. And we have like open source software examples that show people how to do things like workforce scheduling and production scheduling, so they're not having to start from a blank page.
Okay. And then one of the interesting things, again, with the wider world, I don't care about politics, but there are actually some functional issues. So I was talking with an MSP provider here in Canada, and one of the reasons he doesn't deal with Azure is because apparently even though there's an Azure region, it always backs up to the United States. So there's no way to compartmentalize just to Canada, which is a real issue for him.
Okay.
So again, especially when you start talking about the scale of the problems you're talking about dealing with for a lot of these things, with your infrastructure, can you geo-segregate it? Can you say, I only want this processed and data stored in Canada? Or is it more just, it's the cloud?
Well, I would say that the broadest set of users initially are just comfortable using cloud infrastructure.
Yeah.
We certainly have the capability to create tailored solutions for customers if they wanted to go down that route.
Yeah.
And they just have to look at, how large of an engagement do they want to use to sort of create their own custom IT setup for that kind of thing. So
Okay.
it's absolutely a possibility,
Yeah.
and it's just a question of, does the business need meet the scale of the effort that would be required to set that up for folks? The technology is getting, sort of moving in that direction. Certainly there are folks in the US who are also concerned about, data sovereignty. It's a pressing concern for businesses and countries around the world. We have a quantum computing system that's being installed in Huntsville, Alabama for Davidson Technologies to allow them to look at sensitive applications in that space. So that's an opportunity to move in that direction and create solutions like, let's say, within the US.
Yeah, okay. So, but if you wanted that data sovereignty, you'd have to be like an enterprise type customer. Like it would be a lot of
initially,
extra money.
I think, that's right.
Okay.
Certainly, the technology and the product development is happening quickly, and we're working on trying to create offerings that meet those customers' needs where they're at.
Yeah.
So it's like a lot of technologies. It could be the movement of one large player who are building something that is really tailored to their needs, or it could be that there's just a swarm of smaller players who all indicate that that's an important need for them, and that can be built to meet that need.
Okay. And then, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this question, it's curious to me. So about 3 weeks ago, I was feeling sad for you guys, because there's all this news coverage where apparently some short seller had proven that you were all a fraud. Like, I was like, damn, like, he was like mean about it. But then like 2 weeks ago, all of a sudden you guys came out with some new thing and your stock popped by a quarter. So can you talk at all about what so you have some revolutionary thing that people love, and then you had something that was going on before. Can you talk about that at all, with what the drama is?
Well, I mean, I'm not the right guy to comment on stock movements, but I can say that we were really excited to launch our 6th generation quantum computer, the Advantage 2.
Okay.
And that was, I think, highly anticipated. I mean, new product launches in quantum computing are really exciting. We see really big performance increases. That was the most advanced quantum computer we've built to date, and it's the system on which we demonstrated calculations that we could do that supercomputers struggle with. So we were able to perform some real-world calculations of magnetic material properties, simulating those magnetic materials, that would have taken a supercomputer more than 1 million years to do, and we were able to do it in 20 minutes. And what's also fascinating about that is that the energy savings from that, because quantum computing is really, you can think about it as I mentioned earlier, energy efficient compute for hard problems. The energy savings from that calculation would have been equivalent to global electricity consumption annually. We were able to do that calculation with less than $1 worth of electricity. So that suggests that as we see more enterprises exploring the use of our system for these hard problems, material simulation problems, blockchain applications, artificial intelligence applications, if we can offset calculations that are very difficult for these energy-consuming data centers and put them onto quantum computers, we could radically change the energy consumption of our computer infrastructure.
Fair enough. And I guess then the final question is, because again, it was interesting. So I went to see you guys in 2020. Then right after that, you put out the partnership with AWS that you're going to be part of this whole thing. And then Amazon, doing what Amazon always fucking does, apparently they're coming out with their own quantum computers. They're like, hey, these guys are doing something valuable. We're going to do that too. So if I'm interested in quantum computers and I'm interested in putting this into my infrastructure, at this point you've got Google, you've got Amazon, you've got D-Wave, you've got IBM, and probably many others. What is your competitive advantage? Like, why would somebody, especially with people starting, like, it's not like they've always been using something, but like they're starting out, why would they start with D-Wave?
Well, that's a great question, Eli. And the thing is that, like, I'm meeting with people all the time who are curious, like, how do I judge where quantum computers are at and their readiness for business and enterprise? And so we've actually put together a framework called Quantum Realize to help them assess that. The first is, performance. Can your quantum computer outperform classical computers? And it's very easy for us to show. We have actually a variety of results in research papers demonstrating performance, and we have a variety of customers talking about the return on investment that they're seeing in their applications. The second is reliability, right? Is this reliable enough to use? And we've got 99.9% availability and uptime. Our quantum computers have sub-second response times, and we have SOC 2 Type 2 compliance in order to meet those enterprise application needs. And the last one is, are people actually using this for commercial applications, right? So, we've got Pattison Food Group that is running our systems to help them schedule employees within grocery stores. They're expecting that to save their workforce 50,000 hours annually.
Jesus.
We've got NTT Docomo in Japan using it for mobile telecommunications networks. So they're optimizing the communications between moving cell phone users and the base stations. They were able to increase the capacity of that during peak loads by 15%. They're deploying that across 250,000 base stations in Japan. So, you've got large enterprises, they're able to unlock this value and then deploy it across this network of resources and see real potential and real value. And I think those examples are really exciting to people to see. And then when they find out that you can program this with Python and you can build applications in weeks or months, the accessibility is there. So people just need to get started.
Interesting. Okay, so it is a trade show. You have many other people to talk to. If there's a final thing, like if somebody's interested in D-Wave, what would they do next?
Well, I would definitely log onto our website. We've got lots of information there about quantum optimization and the use cases that people are running, so that you're not having to discover it from scratch. You're able to see the uses and even the open source codes that people are running. We've got that Python software development kit, Ocean, on GitHub. So for developers, that's a natural place for them to go and start exploring the examples and looking through the code to see how you construct applications for the systems. And then also, either from our website or directly, they can log into our Leap Quantum Cloud system. They can get access to it, start running some illustrated demos there, and then from there they can connect with us to get API access to the systems to start running their applications. So we got lots of resources online. Check them out.
All right, cool. Well, thank you for coming and talking to us about quantum computers.
It's a pleasure, Eli. Good seeing you again.
Yep.